More woo woo. Good evening. This is going to be Ghost Stories, or my Ghost Stories number 2. If you're interested in the macabre and would like to see the first series of stories that I did, they're on this channel. I know this is a channel that's engineering focused, but unfortunately, I've never been able to keep a channel or anything that I do one thing. So it's going to be about the things that I'm interested in. And certainly, science is a great tool for explaining the physical world. It likes to think that it can deny that there's a metaphysical world behind the material presence that you normally experience. And it refuses to acknowledge the woo-woo dimension. So I'm here to push the woo-woo factor in this video. And in my previous video, I was dealing with stories that were more experiences as an adult, and my own experience in my Ghost Stories number 1, where I actually witnessed a spectre with my wife. We both saw the same thing. We both heard the same thing. So if you want to see that story, certainly I will put it in the description below, a link to that particular video. But in that first video, I said I was going to discuss childhood memories, which were things that, as an adult, I had largely discounted as being the product of vivid imagination, a childlike imagination, because I think as a child you have a more active imagination. Although I honestly believe that I probably haven't changed very much from when I was a child. A lot of people would concur on that issue, or that fact. But at any rate, my first story is going to be related to my time spent at my grandmother's house and my recollections of things that happened there. And she had a very old house in Randwick, Federation House, built in the early 1900s. And it had the old maids' bells, so you could ring from different rooms in the house, and a little number would pop up to tell you which room was calling the servants that were obviously being used at the time. And it was pretty easy to tell where beds might have been placed in the rooms, because usually a bell was near where a bed would have been if it was a bedroom. And I do remember whenever we stayed at my grandmother's house, she had spare bedrooms. And as children, we never wanted to stay in those spare bedrooms because it just creeped us out. We didn't want to be there. So what would normally happen is we would make a bed on the floor in her bedroom, and we would camp there because we felt safer being in the room with her there. Well, one very, very vivid memory that I have is of sleeping on the floors and waking up in the middle of the night and looking over at my grandmother's bed and seeing a figure sitting, so I can see the figure in profile, sitting next to the bed. And it's kind of weird. It wasn't glowing like a bright light. It was kind of an eerie, greyish blue light. Almost like the figure was in grayscale. And the figure was sitting like it was in a chair, but the chair wasn't there. And basically, when I saw this figure, I was just terrified. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. I just was like pretending to be half asleep and looking at this thing and going, am I really seeing this? And I can remember basically just being unable to do anything. And I must have looked at this for a very, very long period of time, and eventually I fell asleep again. Now, I know people are going to liken that vision that I had as something that's just a dream. And once again, that's an argument that I will have difficulty dispelling. But anyway, that's my recollection of what I saw on that particular night. And if that was the only thing I'd ever seen, it might be, a good way to explain it away. and it still might be a good way to explain it away because, like I said, the place was creepy. Um, Later on, as a family, for a little while, we actually had to move into her house and live with her for a little while, and so we were no longer sleeping on the floor in a bedroom. We had a bedroom, and I was in the centre bedroom, so the one next door to her and next door to my parents, as you went down the large corridor. And on numerous occasions, when I was there, my brother shared the room with me, but on some nights when he wasn't there, I had a couple of nights where I could hear breathing, like very, very loud breathing from the other side of the room, basically where a bed would have been. There was a little buzzer or the bell for the servants there. So you can imagine on either side of the fireplace there most likely would have been a bed, and where that bed should have been was where the sound was coming from. And once again, just frozen to the spot. And I'd stopped breathing, thinking, well, maybe I'm hearing myself breathing, but no, I could hear that breathing. So that was another fairly terrifying event that we had. And we used to tell our friends about how terrifying this house was. And on one particular night, we had a friend stay over, a friend of the family. And of course, we'd all been up telling pretty scary stories. So people were having trouble getting to sleep. And we were just lying there, and we can hear this footsteps coming up the hall. And then we can just hear this hideous moaning. And basically we crapped ourselves and ran out the door all together, and ran into our mum and dad and woke them up and everything else. And this friend of the family, when he got home, didn't sleep for about a week, and his parents were ringing us up and saying, tell him there wasn't anything, you didn't hear anything. And we're going, well, we did. Now, there's a good chance that someone next door was having a fight and they were crying, or who knows. So I'm going to let that one slide. But at any rate, terrifying night. My little sister had a story where she was in the front room in my grandmother's bedroom, where my grandmother had a TV set, and she was yelling out for my grandmother for something. And because Greek grandmothers, they're at your beck and call. And probably wanted something to eat, or coffee, or who knows. And this other lady came into the room, and my little sister, who was probably in kindergarten at the time, this was her description that she gave. She said, this woman looked at me and she said, shush up. And she wiped her hands on her apron and then left the room. So that was my little sister's recollection of something that she saw in the house, which was fairly unexplained and a little bit terrifying. And in the other room on the other side, there was a large dining and lounge room. And we had a piano in there. And my sister would be practicing piano, and she'd hear whistling while she was playing. And she'd stop, and the whistling would stop. And then she'd start, and the whistling would start again. And this game would go on for a little while, and eventually she'd just get out of there. So that's my recollections of stuff that happened in and around my grandmother's house from 1901. It must be said that when that house was eventually sold and we were living on the subdivision next door, we had some people move in there, and from what I understand, they didn't have any scary or paranormal experiences. So this is why I can't compartmentalise those memories and those experiences and don't treat them as seriously. But at any rate, that's my recollection of the childhood ghost stories. One more story that I'd like to tell you, which is one that happened as an adult, and once again, not as believable as the experience I have in my ghost stories number one, which is below. But nevertheless, pretty high on the creep factor. I was working as a field service technician for a company that was doing the lotto terminals in Sydney. So for all you people that were buying lotto back in the 90s, I'd say it was like mid to late 90s, each news agency had a little blue terminal, and that was my job. I just go around from place to place fixing these terminals. It was the best job I've ever had. you could train a monkey to do it. So it wasn't stressful. You had to be at home because they need to have an hour's response time. So when my son had just been born, I was basically home changing nappies, doing all the dad stuff. And if we got a call, a field service call, and it was out at Cronulla, say, put the baby in the car, my wife would get in the car, we drive out to Cronulla, 10 minutes, the job's done. I'd take the uniform off, chuck the board shorts on, and into the surf. So, pretty cool job. I went to a news agency in Sydney, and I remember I was just fixing the machine, and I heard the door. There was a small stairway leading up to a doorway, and I heard the door open. And I looked up, and looking at the gap in the door, and the door shut. And then I looked over at the owner. I said to say, "Well, who's that?" And the owner goes, "Yeah. Do you want to know what that was?" And I go, "Yeah, there's someone back there or someone you know." And she says, No, that's our resident ghost. And I'm like, "Oh, wow, okay, tell me more." She goes, "Well, people usually think I'm crazy when I tell them this, but," she said, "that at a particular time of the day, not any particular time, but normally in the afternoons, this door would open and close. And it was on a fairly regular basis. And she said that what she thought it was that she was aware of the fact that the previous owner had actually died out the back. And he died under very tragic circumstances. He'd been in an armed robbery, and he'd been shot, and he'd staggered up those stairs and into that back room, and he'd passed away. So her reasoning was that the owner was just checking up on what was going on in the shop. So, yeah, that was my one ghostly experience as a field service technician. Had lots of other terrifying experiences as a field service technician for the scale company, but that was usually at small goods factories where large Fijian ladies would slap me on the ass with a salami and ask me if I had a girlfriend. But that's for another time, those terrifying stories. Anyway, that's my ghost stories number 2. If I can think of any other woo-woo stuff to tell you, I will. I think the next woo-woo video is going to be on synchronicities and strange coincidences, because I keep a diary and I've got a few of those, and they're even more woo-woo than these woo-woo stories were. So stay tuned. Please hit the like and subscribe, because I need encouragement. So like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon if you want to get notifications of more videos. Content on this channel could be anything. That's whatever I'm doing, but there'll be more of this woo-woo stuff, and certainly some... I'm thinking about trying to get more engineering stuff, but from a bit of a different angle. So please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.